You are aware that Notre Dame is in the process of being reopened. It's been renovated after the fire. And you might remember a year or two ago, I reported here that there were some real wild designs submitted
Oh, yes.
to modernize Notre Dame. Thankfully, the French government said we're going to restore the building as best we can to be similar to what it was before the fire. Thank God for that, quite literally, because the designs were wild, real wild. But we have now the images and some video of Notre Dame. For the most part, they're pretty nice, but there are problems. So let's take a look at Notre Dame. And I'm curious what Father Malachi Martin might say about this. So let's start here with this, posted by someone calling themselves Massimo. We're going to make sure this is muted because there's always copyrighted music, it seems like, in these things. So here's what it looks like now. And I have a problem already with what I see. Can you guess what it is?
Well, it's a little small on my screen, but there's no pews. It just looks like there's folding chairs.
There are chairs, and that's bad enough, but that's actually not my main problem with this. I mean, pews are a relative innovation. It's how bright it is. Notre Dame, you've been to Notre Dame, you told me.
Yes.
Wasn't it not the most brightly lit place?
It was not the most brightly lit place. However, that's the rose window, yes. I think one reason why it was not the most brightly lit place is because it had hundreds and hundreds of years worth of carbon from tallow wax candles being burned at the many altars in the church, and they eventually darkened a lot of the walls inside the church. I think part of what you're seeing, do you remember when they restored the Sistine Chapel and the Last Judgment?
Yeah.
How previously it was very dark and all the colors were very muted.
It was the candles that were doing that.
It was the candles. And it was the same way, I think, in Notre Dame. That the candles over hundreds of years, literally over centuries, continuously burning. It was the carbon smoke of the candles rendered it a dark place. I don't want to say gloomy because it was a church, but it was a dark place. You're right.
So here's the next one. We got some more footage just so we can, from a different angle. I think it's just from a different angle. If it's the same one, we'll skip it. But for a good look, again, it's nice to see that a lot of it was restored. That a lot of the statues didn't need to be completely replaced. They were restored by the best artists available in Europe. That's how you handle a restoration like this. And I will say, of any kind of thing, anytime we see a classic church structure touched by modern hands, it doesn't usually come out looking like this. I'm glad
it's almost always a disaster.
Right. I won't show the pictures here, but there's making the rounds right now of some renovated parish in, I think it's the United States, or maybe it's in Spain, but it went from looking like a Catholic parish, a little dated by modern standards. It went from looking like that to just a brutalist looking, barren walled, white walls, high church Protestant looking building, which is unfortunate.
Right.
But you see, but they did handle this much better in most ways. And you got a glimpse here already of what I'm going to show you now, I think is my first real problem with what we have, because there are problems here. So we go here, Father V on X, a good follow, conservative, ordinary form priest, says, care to share any thoughts on the newly crafted liturgical furnishings for Notre Dame? So let's take a look at this. There, that's your altar.
Oh, Lord.
Right. So they couldn't help themselves. Okay. And then we go, here's your presider, and I guess for two deacons or an altar server or a bishop, here's your presider's chair. Notice how he's facing where the audience will be. And I say audience on purpose. I think that's supposed to be a tabernacle.
I don't know what it looks like, a tombstone.
Right. Yeah. And then you have, I'm guessing that's a holy water font.
I thought it was a soup bowl.
Right. No, right. That looks like the kind of thing you would go to some fancy kitchenware store or department store in their kitchen aisle and see that and go, oh, hey, look, some really kind of rustic but modern looking plates and things. That's what that looks like
I
to
mean,
me.
Anthony, let me ask you a question. Take away the cross, and doesn't that look like a stylized bowl of onion soup?
I mean, yeah, that doesn't even look like water in there. That does look, it looks weird. It's strange looking, but that's not the only thing. Let's go here to, um, let's take a look here to America First Post, who really focuses on that altar. The high altar is still there. There is this great fear in the church that you cannot say the ordinary form of the mass on a high altar, because then the priest has to have his back to the people and it's not inclusive, it's not synodal. And so they put these abominable things and give them a pride of place.
Yeah, and it's an abomination.
It is. So again, they could not help themselves at all. And I know that some people really wanted to know our thoughts on this. And so this is the reliquary for the most, as according to Catholic Sat, the new reliquary for the most holy crown of thorns of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, one of the most important relics in the world in the newly restored Cathedral of Notre de Paris. It was designed as that pilgrims could come and touch the reliquary. Okay, fine. Let's take a look. And you know what it reminds me of in a way? It reminds me of something where you would watch like some sort of like vampire movie set in a slightly dystopian modern version. Think Blade or something. It reminds me of that kind of imagery.
Yes,
And I don't know
I
why
can
it
see
does
that.
it. Yeah, it's weird. And I mean, monstrances are always kind of strange looking to most people, and I get what they're going for here, but
It doesn't look holy.
no, that's what it. Yeah, it doesn't look holy. It looks like modern art done by an artist with at least some sense of the beautiful, as opposed to somebody who would tape a banana to a wall and get paid $40,000 for it. Right? You've seen that. You've seen those pictures, and that I'm not joking.
I've got to go to the grocery store then.
That's an art
I'm in the
piece.
wrong business.
That's an art piece that was on installation recently in some major European gallery. And now we will carefully talk about this part here. As reported by Michael Haynes of LifeSite News, famous fashion designer Jean-Charles de Castelbajac was handpicked by the Archdiocese of Paris to design vestments for the reopening of Notre Dame, according to the Associated Press. He famously made the Rainbow Cross vestments for John Paul II for 1997's World Youth Day and often uses that theme. Now, I'm not going to say that this is James Martin stuff here, but I will say that I can see why you would say it was, right?
I would say that tiptoes right up to the line.
It does, and I will. It's that won't even those vestments won't even make sense in the restored Notre Dame Cathedral, let alone at anything but the most we'll call exuberant and happy, to use a synonym, kind of parish. Think a New Ways Ministry kind of mass.
Right.
And this is what they're going to use or are going to use for the reopening, or maybe by now they have, although I think that mass is December 8th, if I'm not mistaken. This is going to be for their reopening mass. And I'm just curious, what would Malachi Martin have to say if he saw this stuff today? What would his thoughts be on the restored cathedral, the very up-to-date table, altar, and these kind of vestments? What would his thoughts be? Because
I can sum it up in 3 words.
sure.
Regarding those specific elements you just spoke to, he would just look at it and say, it's not Catholic.
And he'd be right. I hate to be the one to tell people this. If you showed me an Anglican priest in this with this stuff, I would still say that was not even Anglican, not in the classic sense of what an Anglican is. Right. Maybe the Church of Justin Welby before he stepped down, and the very strange people who have taken over his post since then, they would be comfortable with it. But this is the new religion.
Yes.
Yes, you see a cross there, but it really is Christ without the cross. Or in this case, a cross without Christ. It's a cross without the sacrifice, without the suffering that goes into being a Christian. That's sort of core to the identity of a traditionally minded Christian. This whole thing is so strange to me that I was a little surprised to see that while they restored Notre Dame, mostly keeping with how it was beforehand, other than the lighting and a couple and other than those modernist things. I mean, obviously they couldn't help themselves. Um, the Archdiocese of Paris isn't exactly known as having the most orthodox priests or the most orthodox bishops in the Latin
Have
way.
you, Anthony? Have you ever been to Paris?
I have not been to Europe in general. I'd like to. It's going to have to wait until my kids are older.
About 25 years ago, I used to work for the American Express General Counsel's office in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And every summer, I had to go on basically a tour of Europe for work because the compliance officers and anti-money laundering officers that reported to me for the various markets, it was much cheaper for me to go and visit each of them in their countries than to fly all 10 or 12 of them over to the United States for a week. It was much cheaper for me to go there. And I would always end my business in London on a Friday so that I could then take the Eurostar train from London's Victoria Station to Gare du Nord Station in Paris. And just so I could have a weekend in Paris before work began on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And I would visit Notre Dame, but I would visit Notre Dame as a tourist attraction because I had a rather disastrous attempt at confession there once. But I would go to the Society of St. Pius X Church of Saint Nicolas du Chardonnay in Paris. And although most people would look at that and say it was beautiful yet verging on decrepit, it was one of the most holy masses I've ever attended in my life. It was a sung high mass on a Sunday.
Beautiful.
And it was packed, standing room only, with ordinary people from Paris.
So we're speaking here today with Rob Morrow, the author of this book right here, which you can find on Amazon. I found it by typing in Ghost of Christmas Love. That's the easiest way to find it. It'll be the first result, but it's Ebenezer Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Love, which is based off of the 1951 Alistair Sims telling of a Ghost of a Christmas Carol, and is a follow-up to that because there's a couple of glaring kind of unfinished pieces of business in that story that are resolved in this, and the hint is in the title. It makes a great gift. It makes great reading for yourself if you like those kinds of stories, and if you are interested in his coming book on Malachi Martin, that will help clear the air on Malachi Martin, as well as I think add to some of the mystery and enigma to it, given that I know some of the details in it. This will help that book come to fruition as well.
Well, it's not going to hurt that you're going to be a beta reader of the book either.
Well, there's that too. That's a spoiler. I will be doing beta reading, and no, I will not be spoiling it for you before it's released. But that's for transparency's sake. People will know I'm not going to hide that I'm helping in my own small way behind the scenes. But I do enjoy that thinking that Father Malachi Martin probably just roll his eyes at what they've done to and be kind of saddened by what they've done to Notre Dame, because it's for the most part very Catholic looking, but it's almost a good synonym for the modernist crisis in the church anyway, because for the most part it looks Catholic until you get to a few things that just don't. And the vestments, that weird looking monstrance that doesn't look like sacred art, it looks like an imitation of sacred art, I think is the way I would describe it. The renovation of the new altar settings, all that stuff is so strange. All right, with that, folks, make sure to check the book. I will, if I can find a share link on Amazon, because so it's not like a 15 paragraph long link. I will try to put a link in the pinned comments after this live stream is over. Thanks very much, as always, folks, for tuning in, and pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine with Rob Morrow. Ave Maria.
Thank you, Anthony.